Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started. So, hi everyone, welcome. Thank you all for coming. I just want to quickly introduce myself for any of you who don't know me. So my name is Lauren and I'm a junior here at the University of Michigan and I'm the Ignite intern for this year. And yeah, I think we'll just go ahead and get started with an opening examen that we're going to do. So you can go ahead and just get comfortable wherever you are and we'll just go ahead and start with that for tonight. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Each one of us has a migration story. For those of us whose migration stories have faded from our family's history or have achieved economic security and prosperity, we can easily forget that each person, regardless of their race, religion, or geopolitical upbringing, is indeed a gift, laden with dignity, value, and transformative abilities. In the spirit of gratitude, reflect on these gifts that immigrants and refugees bring to our communities. Ask God for the grace to see human migration and all of creation as God does, in all its splendor and its sufferings. While believing that sovereign nations have a right to control their borders, the Catholic faith teaches that people have the right to thrive in their homeland. And when forces prevent that, they have the right to migrate to support themselves and their families. Our faith goes on to teach that refugees and asylum seekers should be afforded protection, and that the human dignity and human rights of undocumented migrants should be respected. Reflect on this and think if there has been a time where you saw someone as other instead of seeing them as a neighbor or a friend. Ask God for the grace of conversion towards justice and reconciliation. Pope Francis invites us to not just to see, but to look, not just hear, but to listen, not just to meet and pass by, but to stop and allow ourselves to be moved. He invites us to be a culture of encounter as we welcome, protect, integrate, and promote immigrants and refugees in our local and global communities. Ask God that you may be moved to action by the feelings He stirs in your heart tonight, that you may bring God's love to our hurting world. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Awesome. So, as you guys probably know, today is our kickoff event for a 2-week campaign that St. Mary is doing. So we're doing the Way of the Cross, walking with our immigrant family. So after tonight, we're going to be starting to do a social media campaign for the next 2 weeks where we're going to be going through the Stations of the Cross. So some of the other interns, Cecilia and Caitlin and I have all been working really hard on doing that. So each day, starting tomorrow, we're going to be posting each station, like one station a day, and we're going to have like a reflection and a scripture and a prayer each day. And it's going to be completely bilingual as well. So we really encourage you all to join us on there after that. You can follow us at SMSP Newman on Instagram. And I think we're looking to get it posted on our Facebook page as well. So you can look on there too. And then after that, on March 11th, we're doing a Strangers No Longer event. So we're going to have a couple women from our parish are going to be sharing about their immigration stories. And that's in exactly 2 weeks from today on March 11th at 7 p.m. also on Zoom. And you can register for that event. I have the link, so let me just put that in the chat real quick. So if after this meeting and after the social media campaign, you're interested in checking that out, it's going to be a really cool event and it'll be really interesting to hear from some of the resident parishioners here at St. Mary. So you can register using that link. And then also just to kind of explain what we're going to be doing here tonight. So with these 2 weeks coming up, we really thought it was important to kind of share about more information and just sort of touch on why it's important for us to care about immigration, especially here in Ann Arbor, Michigan. So with part of that, I just kind of wanted to give sort of like an explanation for myself and like where I have been in learning about immigration. So I went on one of the alternative spring break trips through St. Mary last year, and it was to El Paso, Texas. And before going, I Knew nothing at all. I literally did not even know that there was a wall. Like, I had heard about it, but I had no idea that there was actually a physical wall on the border. Um, and we went and saw it, and I was like, wow, this actually is a thing that exists that people have to deal with. Um, and yeah, so we got to hear from a bunch of different types of people, and we heard from lawyers, and we heard from um, migrants and refugees and lots of different types of people, and it was a really awesome experience. And so tonight we're going to be hearing from one of the speakers from that trip. Her name is Heidi Cerneka, and she is an immigration attorney from El Paso, Texas. And she's just going to be talking with us for a bit about immigration and about her experience with that. So Heidi, you can go ahead and take it away.
Thanks, Lauren. And thanks. That was a really nice opening to kind of ground us in this space as we all come racing in, even if we're racing in on Zoom, racing in from other places. So the thought is that I would just explain what is asylum, why people come, and then go a little bit into the situation today as it's changing, and just touch on a couple things that are in the bill that's been proposed in Congress, because that affects all of us. And I'm very aware right now that it's really easy to think that, oh, I voted, I'm done, but the truth is that's only the beginning, and that if we just sit back and rest for 4 years, nothing's going to happen. So I just wanted to touch on a few things in that bill because it affects more than just the people that are arriving at our southern border. So with that, I am going to share, I'm going to try to share, there it is, a PowerPoint, and it's mostly just to give you guys, I'm going to start at the beginning though, not at the end. It's just because I think it has a really good visual contribution to what is asylum and who asks for asylum. And it's kind of my theme now that we should be thinking about people and not politics. And politics is different than policy, but people, not politics. Today around the world, wait, I have to get us out of the way. Today around the world, people are on the move. They're migrating to escape poverty, improve their livelihood and opportunities, or escaping conflict and devastation in their own countries. Women represent almost half of the 244 million migrants and half of the 19.6 million refugees worldwide. It's a huge number. Just the U.S. deserves an immigration policy that reflects our highest values as a nation, and we as people of faith, I would, of course, add in our highest values as people of faith. So here's my visual. What I want to give you a sense is, if you think about who are the people that show up at our southern border, the people that show up, for example, here in El Paso asking for asylum. So think of this big blue square. There are people coming that might be fleeing a climate crisis. They might be looking for economic relief. Droughts and hurricanes have devastated a lot of Central America. They might be fleeing persecution and violence. They might be looking for a better life for their families. Within that, of course, asylum is for people that are fleeing persecution. Asylum, if you think of it as saying, like, my country can't protect me, so I'm asking your government to protect me from persecution in my own country, right? So you have to have a real fear of persecution, and persecution is more than bullying, more than harassment. It's severe harm. You either have to have suffered severe harm, or you have to have a real fear that you're likely to suffer severe harm if you go home. So some of those people, the people fleeing climate crisis, the people looking for economic relief, they're not really coming with a real fear of persecution in the understanding of asylum. So already you see our blue square getting smaller. Just a quick definition, of course, it's all complicated, but a refugee is a person who's been forced to flee his or her own country of origin because of persecution or violence. So they have to demonstrate a well-founded fear of persecution. Means, like, I can be deathly afraid of aliens, but I have to demonstrate that that fear is well-founded. Have aliens landed in my city? Have they come to try to find me? If not, I'm probably not going to get away with a well-founded fear of persecution. they have to show that they're being persecuted because of one of those 5 areas in the next bullet point: race, ethnicity, religion, nationality, political opinion, or this kind of broad category called membership in a particular social group. So you have to demonstrate all of these things that you can't return or that you're afraid to return, and that the state, meaning the government, is either the perpetrator of the persecution or the government is unable or unwilling to control the perpetrator. So think of like gangs. In a lot of countries in Central America, the government's really unable to control the gangs, or perhaps unwilling in places where the police or politicians are actually working together with the gangs. So it's a really broad definition of asylum. And I want to say right here that people in the immigration detention, I work with our detained team. So I work with people who are in detention asking for asylum, which is really like putting someone in jail for doing nothing wrong. Because immigration detention is a jail. As one of my clients said, when I have to ask for permission to take a shower, I'm in jail. So, oh, I just lost my train of thought. Wow. All right, let me just keep going. It'll come back. Anyway, oh, I know what I want to say. 14% of people in immigration detention have attorneys. So 86% of the people in immigration detention are trying to prove all those things on your screen in a foreign country, in a foreign culture, in a Western way of thinking, in a legal system, often not in their first language. And while there's interpreters, it's still very different. For a quick example, because I know I'm going to run out of time. Yesterday I had a hearing and my client is from Haiti. So the judge started by saying to him, and I was on the phone. So the judge started by saying to him, "Is English your best language?" And my client said yes, which is not true, but it's a very intimidating system. And he does speak English, so he felt okay in English. So he said yes. So then the judge proceeded to read all the charges against him, rapid fire, as if he was reading the screen, and saying to a client who's from Haiti, whose first 2 languages are French and Creole, he said, "A refugee is a person who has been forced to flee his or her country of origin because of persecution, war, or violence. Did you understand?" And I thought, you know, if I wasn't sitting there to say, "Your Honor, that's not his first language," and he was intimidated, 86% of the people in that courtroom would be intimidated and not sure how to respond. Okay, so back to the boxes. So the blue box is everybody knocking at our door. The green circle is everybody who has legitimate fear. I'm afraid of gangs. I've been beaten by my husband and the police ignore me. All the people that have a legitimate fear. The yellow box, and that might be generous, but the yellow box would be the people that actually begin to fit what I showed you on the page before. Because if you think about it, gang violence was not one of those 5 categories, nor was domestic violence. So the yellow box are only those people actually get before a judge to try to get asylum. Everybody else gets screened out by ICE, by Border Patrol. And then finally, here in El Paso, approximately 5% of the people that actually go before the judge win asylum. So 95% of the people in the yellow box don't get asylum. It's very discretionary. There are other places like New York where 80% of people actually get granted asylum. Some of that is demographics, some of that's just bias. So it's a very difficult system to get into and to get through. Then we need to go quicker, but then we have all these new policies which are about politics, not about policy, and not really about people or respecting our laws, like the Remain in Mexico program that said you have to wait in Mexico for your hearings, or the third country asylum ban that said if you pass through any country on your way here, then you can't qualify for asylum, which really takes out everybody but people from Mexico. And let me just pause a sec to say, it's really important to understand that refugee law is law for us. So the United Nations after World War II said there are so many refugees from Nazi Germany. We need some kind of structure to make sure they're protected. So they wrote a convention on refugees, the UN Convention on Refugees. Conventions are law. You know, we have the Declaration of Human Rights, we have the standard minimum rules. Those are guidelines that we're supposed to live by as a country that is law abiding and everything. But a convention is signed by the country, so the US signs it and ratifies it in Congress, and it's law. Like, I could hold the government to that in court. And then we came home and we wrote our own Refugee Act. So there are two laws in the United States that make us responsible to make sure that we respect what I put on that one screen, that refugees have a chance, that people have a chance to ask for asylum. Of course, their right is to ask for asylum. They might not qualify. Last one, with the onset of COVID, the government set up a new practice called Title 42, which basically says in a health crisis, we can actually do things that we couldn't any other time. And so now anybody that shows up at our border gets turned around to Mexico without anything else because of the health crisis. What I find interesting is that COVID doesn't know if you have a visa or not. COVID doesn't know your nationality. I can go to Mexico and come back as a US citizen. People fly into the country from other countries without a problem. So clearly, it was another policy really enacted to keep people out. And so the last thing I want to say on that is what's happened. And again, I think we as people of faith and we as a nation that has agreed to welcome refugees and asylum seekers, we have a responsibility to so much more. And what's happened is, in an effort to keep people out, there are officers in the middle of every port of entry. In order to ask for asylum, you have to physically be on US soil. You have to get into the US, and then you say, "Officer, I'm afraid to go home. I'm asking for asylum." So we have officers standing in the middle of the bridges so that people can't physically get on US soil to ask for asylum. When you're desperate, I mean, we talk about the push and the pull factors. What pushed you out of your country of origin? What forced you to leave your food, your culture, your family, your language, your home, everything you know? What forced you to do that? Those are the push factors. And the pull factors are what draws you to the United States. When you flee your home in that level of desperation, by the time you get to the US border, one, you've often borrowed money, but two, you're desperate for protection. And somebody standing at the bridge saying, "You can't come in," people go and find other ways to get in. And so people go over the wall or across the river or through the desert. They're doing that because we're keeping them out. And so what's happening is the shelters here have so many people in wheelchairs because they've gone over the wall and fallen off the wall, which is a desperate thing. So just a couple of the policies. Title 42, closing the border, has expelled over 150,000 people that arrived here to ask for asylum. Expedited removal is another system where Border Patrol and ICE actually decide whether or not kind of you're worthy to ask for asylum. And so people get sent back without ever getting a chance to ask for asylum. The Attorney General carved out domestic violence, gender and gang-based persecution. And when we think of what most of the people from Central America are fleeing, it's gang and domestic violence. Families were separated. And like I said, there's no access to asylum. Look at the picture of the wall. Think of somebody going over that wall and falling off because they're so desperate to ask for protection. Just a reminder, they're people. They're people with names and families. Yeah, so is it about politics where we close the borders, separate families? I had a client whose son was 17 and maybe 8 months when they crossed in to ask for asylum. So what they did is they put them in a hotel and held them until he turned 18. And then they put him in the men's immigration detention and her in the women's detention to ask for asylum. And so, of course, at his first hearing, he said, Your Honor, I want to go home, because he had no idea what was going on and what was going to happen to him. If we're about people, we update our asylum law so it makes sense in 2021. We welcome people from other countries who are seeking resettlement from places like Kenya that have lots of refugees, but they can't be a permanent resettlement. We come together as communities and volunteers to welcome, to donate. And then lastly, just a few signs of hope. Okay, so Remain in Mexico officially is over. Nobody else is put in Remain in Mexico. And here in El Paso, starting tomorrow, finally, some of the like 10,000 people that have been stuck in Mexico are going to be allowed to start coming in to finish pursuing their asylum cases. At the same time, Title 42 continues. So if somebody is fleeing today and they cross the border, cross the wall, and ask for asylum, they're going to get put back in Mexico under the claim that COVID-19 is a threat. But there are small signs of hope. Although we're impatient, people have been waiting years, and so it needs to be faster. And there was a bill proposed in Congress. That's the last thing I want to say, I think. Yeah, I just want to, there's two quotes, and I put them on the paper that I think Lauren has that she's probably going to give out. But there's a quote from Pope Francis saying no one should be obliged to flee their country, but the wrong is doubled when the migrant is forced into the hands of people traffickers in order to cross borders, and tripled when they reach the land they thought would give them a better future, only to find themselves despised, exploited, abandoned, or enslaved. We need to welcome, promote, protect, and integrate those who come in search of a better life for themselves. Our bishop here is an amazing bishop, and he says our broken system of immigration is a wound on this border community. It's a scandal to the body of Christ in El Paso. I think I'm out of time, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to stop sharing. I did it. And then I just want to tell you that in the bill that's been proposed in Congress, and this is where it's going to be hugely important that we actually pay attention and are active. There's a lot of possible remedies. Our immigration law hasn't been updated in like 20 or 30 years. So think of how the world has changed. So there are remedies for people that are undocumented, that have been here a long time, that could start on the road to a green card, to residence, to citizenship. I have clients who are getting removed that have been here since they were 2. And really that's because we never put in effect a policy that would enable them to become citizens, even though they've been here 20 years. I love that we're going to stop using the word alien and start using non-citizen. There's going to be no more bans based on religion or culture. This immigration bill isn't, of course, Mecca, but it's got a lot of great things in it. So I think it's super important that we all pay attention and try to get ourselves motivated, others motivated, and especially our Congress people motivated. Sorry, I probably went over, but that's a quick nutshell.
Thank you so much, Heidi. That was so great, so informative. I know I heard, parts of this talk back in March at El Paso, but just hearing it again, I learned so much more. And it's just, even if you know some of it, it's such a great refresher anyway, just to have it back on your mind. So next up, we're just going to go into small groups for maybe 10 or so minutes. I'm going to put everybody into groups of like 3 or 4, and you can just talk about, thoughts on Heidi's talk, like your initial reactions, or we also have a couple of discussion questions that I'll broadcast out to the rooms as well. But I'll say them here. It's, if you are a migrant, what has been your experience with the faith community's welcome? And if you're not a migrant, do you know somebody who is? And are you proud of how they've been welcomed into your community? And if not, what can we do to change that? So I'll go ahead and get those set up. I don't think it's Heidi. You might have to give me like host access because it's not letting me make breakout rooms, I don't think.
Are you able to do it, Lauren? I can look at that too.
It's not like giving me the option to do it because I think Heidi is still like the host of the meeting, so I think it's not.
Okay, I'll look at that.
Okay.
I'm talking away, responding to you on mute. I can't find the host thing, but if you tell me what to do, I'm happy to.
Okay.
Okay, I got them created, so I'm gonna make that happen.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. All right, I think it worked, Lauren, right?
I think so. I just like didn't join it because I'm like, okay, if we're gonna, because I said I would broadcast the questions, so I don't know if like you can do that.
Yeah, broadcast a message to all. Here, I'll do it.
Yeah, and you
Okay,
can just
so
like,
let me copy and paste them from your document. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm. All right, I broadcasted it.
okay, perfect.
Yeah, sorry, that was weird. That didn't allow you to do that, but
Yeah, I don't know if it's like, I don't know. I'm like looking because I know I saw it before we like started. I had the option to, but then I didn't. So
yeah,
I don't know. Weird.
I don't know, Amy, if you were there, but I'm Amy Proshek, but thanks for being here if you are. I don't know if she left the call or not, but yeah, do you want to, we can talk, Lauren, you and me. You want to do it? It's going well. You're doing great. It's been awesome. Heidi's amazing.
Yeah, she's so like, yeah, she did such a good job and in such a like short time too. I was talking to Claire and I was like, yeah, like 10 minutes, like it might seem like a long time to talk, but it really goes by really quickly. And I felt that a lot with Heidi. It's like I was introducing her 1 minute and then she was wrapping up the next minute.
No, exactly. Especially if she's like, someone knows their stuff when they can concisely like distill.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's amazing. So yeah, and I didn't know, did you know much about like the proposed like this bill?
No.
Yeah, I started looking it up when she was talking about it, but yeah, it's crazy that something like that hasn't been updated in 20 years. Like,
I know.
Anyway,
and you like think that it would, but
I know. Oh, Amy's gone.
Gone.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting too, like seeing, I appreciated the graphic she showed because then it just made me realize like how many people attempt and then just like very few even get a chance, and like how basically the system is set up so poorly that like it's not even really possible. Like it's like possible to make an ask, but really like improbable that anyone would really get through. So it's kind of like,
and it's like, I don't know, one of the big things I like sort of took away from my trip and like hearing her talk about it again too is like it's one thing to like have policies in place, like like restricting certain people and being like, okay, well, if you're not, just like different particular rules, but it's another thing to like actively be stopping people from even asking to come to the country. Like what Heidi was saying about the like Border Patrol agents just like stationed at the border, which is so crazy because like we saw that and they're all just stationed there and they will prevent you and do anything they can to prevent you from crossing the border, because if you cross the border, they have to let you seek asylum. So
that was interesting too with the COVID or the Title 42 thing with COVID. It was just like, wow, like another preventative. thing too, which is just sad.
Yeah.
Yeah, I went like for the El Salvador trip a couple years ago, like hearing the stories of like why people leave and like what happens to them on the journey is just like was horrific beyond imagining to like hear like parents of kids who've like lost their kids and like haven't even heard from them in years or like don't know where they are or just like yeah, there was a couple of stories that were just horrific to be listening to and like how much they have to go through just to even like maybe even just getting to the United States is like a process and then like seeing that the process is so like such a faulty system that it's just like so unfortunate because like how much they have to get through just even to get to the doorstep and then be like basically just kicked off or not even accessed or just yeah it's just anyway yeah it was moving to hear the stories for sure like that's like that was the best part about the ASB trips like that too just like seeing that and just yeah being so moved with that but yeah
Well, I think it's kind of hard too because I feel like at least like when I was on my trip and like still now too it feels like there's not. I liked Heidi's last slide about like there's still hope. Like this is so upsetting, but there is hope because like on one side with the Title 42 and COVID and that being an excuse to not allow people into the United States, like, oh, you pose a health risk to the United States, stay there. At the same time, if we allowed them to come in, they would be in detention centers, and the detention centers are obviously not a good place for COVID. Like, there's no like PPP or anything, so not like there's almost no good option to an extent. So
yeah it's interesting to hear too like how COVID has changed some of the things and then on top of it a new administration how like both of these dynamics I kind of want to ask her too of like what she's seen with like a shift just not like in combination with those two things like what are the biggest shifts from not just like politically I guess but just like from people's mindsets too about immigration from that sense but yeah
we should probably like call them back because it takes a minute to
yeah maybe we've only been in here for what 5 minutes or 6 minutes maybe.
Oh, have we? I was like thinking that we like went right at well I guess yeah because we went I know she stopped at 7:25.
Yeah, then it was like 7:27 we did. So it's been like seven. I mean, maybe one more minute.
We'll give them a couple more minutes then. Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah. Because then we'll do, yeah, we probably want to move to like, yeah, the next pieces for it. But you're doing great with the timing. It's working out really well. So I think it's been great. So yeah, I'm really excited of all the work that you did. This is awesome. It's been really good. So I was nervous too when we started. I was like, oh no. Like but look at it, we got 25 people, Lauren. You did a great job.
Yeah, when I first realized that the link wasn't working for Claire and Heidi to join, because I could see like on the outline them like clicking it, and I was just sitting here in the call like waiting for them to come in, and then it was like 4 minutes, and I was like, well, something's wrong, and I'm like, this is not good. Like literally the first thing that could go wrong goes wrong, but I'm glad it worked out.
It all did, yeah. So do you know what your transition kind of statement or question will be? You got that kind of to segue in?
Yeah, I mean, I was just gonna say like that we're gonna like first open it up for people to talk about like what they talked about in their small groups, if anybody wanted to share anything from that.
Cool. Okay.
Yep.
So can I just like close the rooms or just say like 1 minute or what should I do in the broadcast? Or
Yeah,
just,
if you close the rooms, then it'll like give them a timer for 1 minute. So if you like close them a minute before you actually want them to be here.
Great. All right, I hit it. So I got 60 seconds. So
people, it'll like give them the option to leave their breakout rooms. So if they're not having if they're just sitting there awkwardly, they might come back. But
right. If they haven't hit it now, that's pretty good.
That means they're talking, which is good.
Yeah.
Although we dropped like 6 people when I said we were going to do breakout rooms, which to be expected, but
yep, to be expected. It's all good. It's all good. Yeah, did you tell Father Joe that? Did you send the regards from Heidi to Father Joe?
No,
Father,
I didn't.
oh, you got to.
I know, I have to. Well,
Was he
for
on your
sure.
trip too, Lauren, or no?
What? Yeah, he was.
Nice. Okay,
No.
that's cool.
Okay, awesome. I think everybody's back now. So now we're just gonna move into like the Q&A portion, but I first wanted to just open it up and just see like if anybody had anything that they wanted to bring up from your small groups, if there's anything that like you wanted to share that you guys talked about, or like any questions that came up from that.
If it's okay, I'd like to share what Louise said. Louise, is that okay? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I thought it was really awesome how she said that she drives some of the people that have ICE appointments over. And I mean, I think that's really awesome because a lot of the people that come in, they don't really have anyone here that can take them. And even if they do, maybe they don't have a license. And then they themselves are also scared because they're like, okay, I'm taking you to this appointment, but like, what's going to happen to me? Like, let's say you get detained. And then, you know, even for her to take also numbers just in case if something was to happen, she can contact someone. I think that's just incredible. Like she's already doing her part. And I thank her for that. I was explaining to them that my parents migrated here. I'm first generation. They migrated from Mexico. So I thank her for doing stuff like that and helping people out. It means a lot.
Well, you can thank Amy Kentner for setting it all up. Thanks, Amy.
Thank you, Amy. Always the best.
I guess I'll do a shameless plug. If anyone ever wants to participate in our immigration efforts, we have a beautiful team of a lot of folks, and there are many, many different ways to plug in. Claire will talk more about it, but definitely happy to talk with anyone who's interested.
So I think I have a question for you, Heidi. So part of what you would talk about, I think it was on like your second or third slide, was when talking about asylum, saying that you need to, that one of the options is having proof of a well-founded fear of persecution. So I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit about like how you would prove, I know that that's a whole thing of like how you can possibly prove a well-founded fear of persecution.
That's a super legitimate question. There is a beautiful thing in immigration law, which is different than criminal law, in that you don't have to have evidence, because often if you're fleeing your country, like I had a client that the gang was banging on the front door because they wanted her to be a gang girlfriend. And she and her mom ran out the back door in Honduras and walked to the US border. I said, how long did that take? And she said 3 months. You don't stop to pick up, you know, photos and documents as you're running out the door. So are you credible? A big piece of that is, are you believable? You know, and a lot of that is really the judge's discretion. Do they find your story believable? Are you consistent? do you have, we often use articles, like I'll use articles about El Salvador, Nicaragua, Guatemala, that show that some of what my client's saying is happening in that country. So is what you're saying consistent with what is going on in that country, what other people have said? There's two pieces to it. One is your subjective fear. Do you convince the judge that you personally are really afraid? And I'm afraid of war isn't good. Like, I have to be afraid because somebody's trying to attack me, Heidi. Somebody's trying to persecute me, Heidi, not, all left-handed people in the country, but specifically me. And so do I convince the judge that my personal fear is real? And then do I convince the judge in a more objective way that fear is legitimate? If you can bring evidence, sometimes people have pictures, sometimes people from countries where they get arrested for taking a stand against the government, they'll have like police reports or police citations. So that evidence supports what you say, but you can actually win asylum with no evidence but your credible story. I had a guy from Iraq, and he couldn't get evidence, and his family wasn't comfortable sending him things on the internet. So he couldn't even, when he was here, write and say, hey, can you send me a picture of this or that? And the only evidence we had was that he said he was on the national jiu-jitsu team before he fled. And I actually found a picture of him with his bronze medal from when he won the bronze in the World Cup Jiu-Jitsu. That was the only evidence we had, and he won asylum.
Looks like there's a question in the chat for you, Heidi, is wondering if you could talk about who becomes an immigration judge and how they get to be one.
Immigration judges are different than, I don't know if every state's different, but often when you vote in elections, you vote for judges, right? Immigration judges are appointed by the Department of Justice. So they can be very skewed to whoever's in the Department of Justice at that time. They can also be removed, but most of the immigration judges we see are former prosecutors, and so while a judge is supposed to be the impartial arbiter, like I bring my stuff to defend my client, the government brings the reasons why my client should never get asylum, and the judge is supposed to impartially take all of that, weigh it, and apply it to asylum law. There's clearly a sense, and that's why I was talking about bias, that immigration judges often feel like it's their job to keep people out, in a way that's really unfair. And in my opinion, they're super Western thinking. Quick example, I had a client who claimed that he was kidnapped from a parade in Honduras. He was gay and he was kidnapped from a gay pride parade. And the judge said, sir, you say you were kidnapped from the parade. What day of the week was the parade on? And my client said, I don't remember. And she said, well, was it a weekday or a weekend? And I literally saw my client turn to the translator, to the interpreter, and say, what's a weekend? And I think the interpreter said, weekends are Saturday and Sunday. When we're not working. Well, he worked in food service, so he probably worked Saturday and Sunday, but he said, oh, well, the parade was on my day off, so it must have been a weekend. And the judge said, well, sir, July 25th, 2018 was a Wednesday. And I thought, okay, could you be a little more narrow in your thinking? So that's a really long answer to say that they're appointed by the Department of Justice. And in my opinion, especially here in El Paso, they're pretty biased.
Okay,
that can be said, sorry to interrupt, that can be said of our judges in Detroit too, unfortunately. We have at least one, if not multiple, who have worked for ICE before.
It's very rare that you see someone that was like one of us going to be an immigration judge.
I just trying to process that. I've never really thought about that. That's crazy. Another question for you, Heidi, is how did you get involved in this type of work?
So I've worked most of my adult life out of the country. I spent 18 years in Brazil, 2 years in Belize, a year in Kenya. And then I went to law school. So you're never too old to learn. I tied for the oldest in my class. And it just, at this point, I felt like when I graduated from law school, it was an issue that was so urgent, and something in my own country, right? When I'm working in Brazil, I was there long enough that I felt like I could be critical about the government and stuff, but I was like, here I can work for change, try to start to repair some of the harms that my own country has caused in a very clear way, and in a way that there's no discussing the gospel mandate, right? Of welcoming the stranger. So, yeah.
So a question, Heidi. I know that in the summer of 2018, particularly like in late July, the Occupy ICE, Abolish ICE movement really came to maybe its most present in at least the national conversation. Could you speak a little bit to, I guess, the efficacy or the usefulness of direct action projects like that?
I think those are extremely important because they call us to think and debate issues, right? We're not going to end up with no kind of immigration system in this country, but when you start raising those questions, if people are open to dialogue, and in our small group, we talked about that a little bit. I said, really, if we want change, we have to engage people, not judge them and not shut the door on them, right? We have to engage them. And so if we're open to dialogue, then we say, well, what do you mean abolish ICE? Like now, you know, the movements to abolish police, the whole, oh my gosh, lost for words again. The whole movement to end prisons, right? Those are movements where we can at least draw us to say, okay, well, what does that mean? And why do we want that to happen? And what do we think we need? And so they help us, I think, reframe it. And they make a very clear statement of saying, I'm against what this stands for, you know. In that way, I think they're extremely important. Just like we always need people in the extremes to stretch us, even though in the end we'll probably end up back here, but we need those extremes to stretch us. And the question is, can you actually reform something like ICE to a place where it's actually effective and humane? Or do you have to scrap ICE and come up with something else? I don't know if I answered your question, Nate, but some thoughts on it.
Oh, that's helpful. Thank you.
I don't know if you have thoughts on that you want to share, maybe too, or if anybody else does.
Maybe not something that's being recorded.
Okay, if nobody else has any more questions, then we're going to go ahead and move on, and Claire is going to talk with us. So Claire is a senior here at the University of Michigan. She was one of the other people on the El Paso trip with me. She's majoring in biology and minoring in Spanish, and she's here to talk with us about the immigration team and what they do here at St. Mary and what we can do about immigration here in Ann Arbor to kind of bring it home.
Yeah, so thanks, Lauren. So as Amy and some other people have already mentioned, we have this awesome immigration team at St. Mary's, and we do lots of amazing things. So I just want to kind of talk about that a little bit. And I recently have become a member of it, and it has been such an amazing space to really walk with immigrants and learn and just be part of the immigrant community here in Ann Arbor and Southern Michigan. So just kind of a little bit about who is in the immigration team. So it's anybody who wants to be part of it. So resident parishioners, students, grad students, young professionals, anybody. So if you would like to join, please do. So we have, there's three major pillars that the immigration team kind of focuses on, and those are education, advocacy, and accompaniment. So the education part of the immigration team is a lot of events like this, like learning about the immigration system in the U.S. Like Lauren mentioned, there's a Strangers No Longer event on March 11th. Just hearing testimonies and like our social media campaign that's coming up, just like learning and really listening to the stories of others and just finding a way to bring immigrant voices in our lives and make that a prevalent force in our lives. And so I just kind of want to explain a little bit about Strangers No Longer too. So this Strangers No Longer is an organization that was kind of founded with the immigration team here at St. Mary's, and then it kind of encompasses, I think, like around like 25 different churches and Catholic schools around southern Michigan, and they all kind of come together to walk with immigrants and work for education and advocacy and accompaniment, just like our immigration team does. And so that's kind of where we're partnering with Strangers No Longer on March 11th for that. So just a little background about that. And then the advocacy aspect of the immigration team has been a lot. Has been a large part meeting with state representatives and advocating at like the state level for our immigrants. Recently we had some meetings with Felicia Brabeck and Yosef Ravi to talk about the Drive Safe bill, which is a bill that would allow undocumented immigrants to in Michigan to obtain a driver's license. And just like Monica was talking, like it's very difficult for undocumented immigrants to get to doctor's appointments and court hearings, and it's always a risk to drive anywhere. So this is such an important thing, so both representatives were in support of the bill in the meetings that we had, and they were really responsive and listening to the points that many of the members of our immigrant community made. And so that was a really awesome and hopeful thing. But now, I mean, the obstacle still lies in the hands of the Chair of Transportation to, bring this bill to the committee to be voted on. But, this hasn't happened in the past few years. So there's still a long way to go, but this advocacy, this talking with representatives is a really big step, and that's how we get places. It's the little steps. And then the next pillar is accompaniment. So that's we're talking about like the driving immigrants to court hearings or driving parishioners to their ICE check-ins, and this was a big thing pre-COVID, so that was a lot more prevalent then, and it's just so important to be there for people in our community who are experiencing these hard times, like just to like be with them and sit with them and know that they're not alone. I mean, I can't even imagine going through that uncertainty with a family or just by yourself. So I think the accompaniment portion of the immigrant team is super important and such an amazing part. And then we also have English as a second language, and that is going on at St. Mary's, and that's still happening. We're having conversations on Zoom, and so English tutors are always needed. And then also a big part of the COVID relief right now is driving Kroger cards to drop them off at families and homes of people who need them. And a large portion of the people who receive their Kroger cards are in the immigrant community. So that was just a really an awesome way to support. And even if you want to donate to that COVID relief fund, that's very helpful. And then to kind of talk about a little bit more about who the immigration community is here in Ann Arbor, and specifically in St. Mary's, it's really interesting because we talk a lot about Heidi talked a lot about how there's such like a small portion of people who actually can seek asylum, and so I think that's really prevalent in the community here, because many people are, like, very few people here are asylum seekers, because many don't qualify for asylum. So, you know, a lot of people we have in the community here are some of them are on temporary visas, and then there's some have obtained citizenship, but many are undocumented, just waiting for family visas, or just have no path to citizenship. And then also a really important thing to note is that many of our people in the community here have been here for 5 to 20 years. And so many of their children are are DACA recipients or US citizens. So it's just a mix of so many different walks of life and so many different people that are here, which is such an amazing thing to, be exposed to so many beautiful stories and cultures. And I think it's such a beautiful thing to be able to be part of their lives. So just to kind of end, to talk a little about the action steps we can take. So, I really encourage you to continue to seek education about immigration, to seek out like information and stay updated on policies, and just listen to people's stories and be there for people. And when you do have that education, bring it up in conversation and talk about it with others. Like, that is such an important thing, and I think that really brings it to the front of people's lives and gets people talking. And I've seen that in my own life, and I'm very passionate about immigration, but I found that just talking about it has been really helpful. And then also, as I kind of mentioned before, all the different opportunities that the immigration team offers, become like a English as a second language tutor, or be on the driver list to help drive COVID cards, or drive, immigrants to doctor's appointments if they need, and just be here and be supportive and in any way you can. There's so many amazing opportunities. So I just thank you so much for listening. And yeah, I would encourage you, if you want to become part of the immigration team, reach out to Amy. She's always would love to have more people. And yeah, or reach out to me too. I would love to talk about it. So yeah, thank you so much.
I have a question for Heidi. Heidi, here in Michigan, our ICE appointments have temporarily stopped because of COVID. And I wonder if you have any sense of when things will start picking up again, and when we might start seeing people having to return to their ICE appointments.
We don't yet. I mean, I had a guy who, of course, was so fearful that he paid an Uber $30-something to go to an ICE appointment the other day, even though it was snowing here in Texas. And sure enough, he sent me pictures when he got there of the door padlocked, because I'm always like, just take a picture in front of the door so you can prove you were there. We don't have a sense yet, and I think different places might be different. Our courts aren't running yet, whereas in some places, the non-detained courts are running. In some places they say to me, we'll call your client when we start making appointments again, but in some places they don't. And so I just tell clients to keep calling once in a while so they've done their side, I'm going to toss in 3 more nuggets. I don't know if Amy was going to add anything, but 3 more quick nuggets. 1, learn a language. I think we all need to learn Spanish. So try to learn Spanish. I know people have this like, oh, I'm terrible at languages. Try to learn Spanish. I think that's imperative right now in this country. And just one of the things that Claire said, I don't remember numbers, but there's a really high percentage of the like 10 to 11 million people that are in the US right now undocumented. The vast majority have been here more than 10 years. So I just want to repeat, like, they're undocumented is our government's fault, because if somebody has been here that long living and working, then there should have been a pathway. And then the last thing is just a plea. I think we became I'm hoping that this reduces a little bit, but we became so polarized in this country. And I think as citizens of the world, as people of faith, we have to be the ones that reach out. We have to be the ones, that reach out first and say, can we talk about that? you know, I mean, it's really easy for me to hang out with a bunch of people that think like I do. Or it's really easy for me to be like, if someone comes up to me, I'll be open to a conversation. But I think our demand as people of faith is to be the one that stretches and invites dialogue, even though it's really hard because sometimes it's in our own homes, right? But we can do it.
Thank you, Heidi, and thank you, Claire, for sharing. And I just want to say, if anybody has any more questions or anything else that they want to bring up, I know all of us who spoke here today and Amy and we would all be completely willing, more than willing to answer your questions or just to have further conversations about all of this. But if nobody else has anything that they want to add, we'll just go ahead and wrap up in closing prayer. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Merciful God, we pray to you for all the men, women, and children who have died after leaving their homelands in search of a better life. But many of their graves bear no shame. To you each one is known, loved, and cherished. May we never forget them, but honor their sacrifice with deeds more than words. We entrust to you all those who have made this journey, enduring fear, uncertainty, and humiliation, in order to reach a place of safety and hope. Just as you never abandoned your son as he was brought to a safe place by Mary and Joseph, so now be close to these, your sons and daughters, through our tenderness and protection. In caring for them, may we seek a world where none are forced to leave their home and where all can live in freedom, dignity, and peace. Merciful God and Father of all, wake us from the slumber of indifference, open our eyes to their suffering, and free us from the insensitivity born of worldly comfort and self-centeredness. Inspire us as nations, communities, and individuals to see that those who come to our shores are our brothers and sisters. May we share with them the blessings we have received from your hand and recognize that together, as one human family, we are all migrants, journeying in hope to you, our true home, where every tear will be wiped away, where we will be at peace and safe in your embrace. In Jesus' name we pray. Okay. Thank you all for coming. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks, Heidi.
Thanks, Heidi.